The exact age when your 401k starts working for you is not the one on any retirement brochure. There is a specific mathematical threshold, a moment with a name, a formula, and a number, and once your account crosses it, the entire physics of your retirement savings reverse. Before that line, you are the engine. After it, the account is. Most retirement content never explains what that line is or how to find it, which is why most people spend 30 years contributing without ever understanding what they are actually waiting for. By the end of this, you will know where your line is, and more importantly, whether you are already closer to it than you think. Here is what the financial industry wants you to measure: balance, contribution rate. Whether you are maxing out all legitimate things, but none of them tell you whether your 401k is actually working for you or whether you are still working for it. That distinction is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more, and it is almost never discussed in plain language. I've been running my own business for over a decade, surrounded by accountants and fiscal lawyers, and I have multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in these accounts right now with skin in the game. So when I tell you this shift is real, I am not talking about a textbook concept. Let me give you the metaphor I'm going to use for this entire video, because it's the only one that actually captures what happens inside a compounding account over time. There is a species of Chinese bamboo that does something extraordinary. You plant it, you water it, you fertilize it, and for 4 years, nothing happens. Nothing visible above the ground anyway. People who don't know the plant assume it's dead, but underground, it is building a root system, a foundation, a structural network that no one can see. Then in the 5th year, the bamboo breaks the surface. And in the next 6 weeks, it grows 90 feet tall. Your 401k is that bamboo. And the single most dangerous thing you can do is pull the plant out of the ground in year 3 because it looks like nothing is happening. Now, in a few minutes, I'm going to show you the exact mechanism that causes the bamboo to finally break through and why most Americans are unknowingly cutting the root system every year with a decision that feels completely reasonable. But first, let me tell you about the underground years and why they feel so discouraging. The numbers here are genuinely sobering. According to Vanguard's How America Saves report, based on 2024 data across nearly 5 million participants, the average 401k balance for Americans between 25 and 34 is $42,640. That sounds okay until you look at the median, $16,255. The median is the real number. Half of Americans in that age group have less than $16,000 saved for retirement. The average is skewed by the few people who started early and never stopped. For the 35 to 44 bracket, the average is $103,552. The median is $39,958. For 45 to 54, the average is $188,643. The median is $67,796. That median column is the ballpark most people are actually living in. And looking at those numbers, it is reasonable to feel like the 401k system is broken. Like you are doing everything right, and the math still does not add up. But here is the thing. You may be measuring the wrong number entirely. The number that actually matters is not your balance. It is the ratio between what your balance generates per year versus what you contribute per year. And there is a specific moment, researchers call it the crossover point, when those two numbers switch positions. Let me make this concrete. Say you are investing $1,000 a month and your portfolio earns 7% annually. In year 1, your contributions do 100% of the lifting. Your market gains are basically zero because your balance is small. In year 5, your balance is around $72,000. At 7%, that's about $5,000 in annual gains. Your contributions were $12,000. You are still outworking the market. Contributions win 2-1. But in year 11, your balance has crossed roughly $189,000. At 7%, that generates about $13,200 in a single year, more than the $12,000 you put in. The machine just crossed over. Your contributions are now the supporting actor. The balance is the lead. That is the exact moment. That is when your 401k starts working for you. Now, here's why this matters more than any other number in retirement planning. Every year beyond that crossover point, the gap widens. The portfolio compounds on itself. The annual contribution becomes relatively smaller every year. Eventually, as Fidelity's long-term account data shows, someone with a 15-year continuous savings history has an average balance of $617,600. Someone with 10 years, $465,000. The difference between 10 and 15 years in the same plan is not 50% more money. It is 33% more time. But the outcome is 33% more money only if you are still in the contribution phase. If you have crossed the crossover point, that extra 5 years of compounding is worth exponentially more. So the real question is not how much are you contributing? The real question is, have you hit escape velocity yet? Now, stay with me, because this is where it gets genuinely interesting, and this is also where most mainstream retirement advice quietly loses the plot. The conventional advice is maximize your contributions. Max out the 401k. Hit the limit. In 2026, that limit is $24,500 per year if you are under 50. Good advice. I agree with it. But here is the reversal that most people never see. You think the problem is that you are not contributing enough. The actual problem for a significant portion of middle-class Americans is that they are compounding in the wrong direction. There's a type of fee quietly running inside most 401k plans called an expense ratio. It is the annual percentage cost of the funds you are invested in. The average 401k plan for a small company with 25 participants and $250,000 in total assets charges 1.37% in total investment expenses. According to the 21st edition of the 401k Averages book, that sounds like a minor detail. It is not. Here is the math that will make you pause. Starting with $50,000, adding $6,000 per year, earning 7% annually over 30 years. With no fees, your balance grows to $1,514,091. Add a 1% fee, which again is below average for a small plan, and your balance shrinks to $1,110,746. That is more than $400,000 gone to fees on a 7% return. But it gets structurally worse than that, because that $400,000 did not just disappear from your final number, it delayed your crossover point. Every dollar taken out by fees is a dollar that did not compound, which means your annual gains are smaller than they should be, which means you stay in the contributions outpace returns phase longer, which means the machine takes longer to start working for you. A 1% fee does not cost you 1%. It costs you years of momentum. Here is what a good financial advisor should be telling you, but statistically does not, because they often charge you somewhere between 1 and 1.5% per year to manage your assets. That is their incentive structure. Not a conspiracy, just an incentive. And I find that more amusing than outrageous at this point. Their business model is mathematically incompatible with maximizing your crossover point speed. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content. Otherwise, YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. Here's the frame for what I just described. There are two types of 401k savers. The first type contributes consistently and pays average fees and never thinks about the underlying fund costs and slowly builds toward retirement and eventually gets there, roughly on schedule, give or take a few years. Fine, this works. This is most people. The second type does the same contributions but switches to low-cost index funds, Vanguard, Fidelity, Schwab, with expense ratios of 0.03 to 0.1%. Same market. Same S&P 500 exposure, just keeping more of every return. That person hits the crossover point faster, not by working harder, not by contributing more, by removing a drain. Now let me introduce you to Marcus. Marcus is 38. He started contributing to his 401k at 26, putting away about $400 a month. His company matched 3%. he has never maxed his contributions. He went through a rough patch at 31 and pulled contributions down to $150 a month for 2 years. His current balance is around $112,000. And he spends a lot of time thinking he is behind. Here is what Marcus does not realize, and what I'm going to return to at the end of this video. But first, let me tell you about the decade that most retirement content skips over. The 9-year period from your late 20s to your late 30s is the compounding runway phase. Nothing feels significant. Your balance is not impressive at social events. You are not a retirement success story. You are the bamboo underground building root systems. And the psychological weight of that is real. It is why, according to research from the National Bureau of Economic Research, automatic enrollment in 401k plans raises participation rates by 50 to 67 percentage points because left to make the decision actively, many people pause, look at the small balance, feel discouraged, and do less than they otherwise would. The human brain is wired to respond to feedback. You want to see the bamboo above ground. When the balance at 33 is $47,000 and you feel like you are nowhere, you are actually inside the most mathematically productive years of the entire savings timeline, because every dollar you add right now has more runway ahead of it than any dollar you will ever add again. Here's a parable that makes this physical. There's a story about a physicist who was asked to calculate when a ball rolling down a hill becomes unstoppable the moment friction cannot slow it anymore. The answer was not at the bottom. It was not even halfway down. The ball becomes unstoppable early, when most people looking at it would say it is barely moving. The physics are already locked in. The momentum is structural. By the time the ball is visibly accelerating at the bottom of the hill, the outcome was already determined 2/3 of the way up. Your 401k has the same physics. The outcome at 65 is largely determined by what you did or did not do between 25 and 45. This is not a motivational statement. It is arithmetic. Now, here is where it gets really interesting, and where I want to pivot to the part that no one in mainstream retirement planning is going to volunteer to explain to you. The financial services industry has spent decades optimizing their messaging around one number, 65. That is the finish line. That is when you stop working and start withdrawing. Max your contributions, stay the course, and at 65, you arrive. The problem with that framing is that it treats your 401k as a savings account, a container you fill up, rather than a compounding engine with its own growth dynamics. And when you treat it like a savings account, you optimize for contribution size. When you understand it as a compounding engine, you optimize for crossover point speed. Here's the cost of the savings account mindset. 64% of Americans, according to the 2025 Allianz Annual Retirement Study, worry more about running out of money than about dying. That is not a data anomaly. That is the result of a system that told people to save, but never told them at what point the system starts to save itself. And here is where I will tell you about the part of this that I find genuinely, quietly broken. The median retirement account balance for individuals between the ages of 55 and 64, the people who are literally in the final stretch before conventional retirement, is around $185,000, according to the Survey of Consumer Finances. The average American household spends $77,280 per year. According to Empower, run that math. $185,000 at the standard 4% withdrawal rate generates $7,400 per year. For a household spending $77,000, that is the gap. That is not a rounding error. That is a structural failure, not of discipline, not of personal finance habits, but of understanding the crossover point and when to chase it. Here's the part that never makes it into a standard retirement calculator. Knowing the crossover point exists and knowing where yours is are two completely different problems. I built a digital book called The Exit Code, 8 chapters of pure retirement data research, no filler specifically to address the gap between understanding these concepts and having a mathematical framework to act on them. It covers things like the 58% rule, the statistics showing how many Americans are forced out of work before they plan to retire, which destroys the math of a normal retirement timeline and the dynamic withdrawal method, which replaces the 4% rule with something that actually adjusts to sequence of returns risk, instead of hoping the market cooperates in the first 5 years of your retirement. If you are watching this and you are 45 or older, the sequence of returns risk chapter alone is worth a dinner out's worth of money. Because what happens in the first 2 years of your withdrawal phase determines more about your retirement longevity than what happens in the preceding 20 years of accumulation. The link to get it is in the description. It is built on 50 years of actual retirement data, not opinion. And it does what good math does. It turns a vague feeling of maybe, someday, into a specific date. Now let me come back to Marcus and to what he is actually sitting on. Marcus is 38 with $112,000 in his 401k. His fund expense ratio is 1.1%. He does not know that. He has never looked at it. He chose his funds when he started at 26 by picking the one with the word growth in the title. It seemed right. Here is what Marcus would know if he switched to a low-cost index fund equivalent with a 0.04% expense ratio. Over the next 27 years, until he is 65, the fee difference on his current balance alone, not counting future contributions, would compound to roughly $90,000. Not in fees he paid. In gains he did not earn because the money was eaten before it could compound. But there is something more important happening in Marcus's account right now that he is not seeing. At $112,000, with a 7% annual return, his 401k is generating approximately $7,840 per year in market gains. His annual contribution, including his employer's 3% match on a $65,000 salary, is approximately $11,300. His contributions are still winning, but not by much. At his current savings rate, Marcus will cross the crossover point in approximately 3 years when he is 41. At that point, his account's annual gains will exceed his annual contributions. The machine will switch on. Marcus thinks he is behind. He is actually on schedule. He is just measuring the wrong thing. And this is the subplot I want you to hold on to. Because the psychological cost of watching a number that feels small, not understanding that the root system is already being built, causes people to make the single most damaging decision available in retirement investing. They stop, or they slow down, or they cash out during a job transition and take the 10% penalty and the income tax hit and the decades of compounding they will never get back. Here is the real irony. The people who feel behind are often the people who, if they held course for 4 more years, would have crossed into the self-sustaining phase. They are the bamboo in year 4, and they pull the plant. Now, I want to tell you about the single most underused provision in the current tax code. And I want to be specific because the numbers matter here. Starting in 2025 and continuing in 2026, the Secure 2.0 Act introduced what the IRS is calling a super catch-up contribution for workers aged 60, 61, 62, and 63. If you are in that window, you can contribute $24,500 as your base, the standard 2026 limit plus an additional $11,000. $250 in catch-up contributions for a total of $35,750 per year into your 401k tax advantaged in a single year. For context, if you are 50 and older but not yet in that 60 to 63 window, the regular catch-up is $8,000 for a total of $32,500 per year. Now, here is why this matters structurally and not just numerically. For a person who hit their crossover point late, say at 52 instead of 40, the super catch-up window at 60 to 63 is a 3-year sprint that can accelerate the compounding base dramatically at precisely the moment when the machine already has enough mass to generate significant annual returns. You are not starting over. You are turbocharging something that is already running. Think about it this way. At 60, with $250,000 in your account, your annual gains at 7% are $17,500. You add $35,750 in contributions. On top of that, your account grows by $53,000 in 1 year. The following year, the base is larger. The gains are larger. The machine is accelerating. 3 consecutive years of maximizing the super catch-up window, 60, 61, 62 can add more to a late starter's retirement outcome than the previous decade of normal contributions. This is not hype. This is arithmetic. The numbers just work differently when the base is large enough. Wait, you're asking yourself, why did no one tell me this was available before? Because it did not exist. The Secure 2.0 Act, signed in 2022, phased it in starting in 2025, which means this is new. As in 18 months old, most people have not heard of it. A lot of advisors have not fully integrated it into their planning conversations. I read the IRS. Notice it is. Notice 2025-67. So you do not have to. One caveat. Starting in 2026, if you earned more than $150,000 in FICA wages in 2025, your catch-up contributions must go into a Roth account after tax dollars. This is the Secure 2.0 Roth catch-up rule. Your plan must offer a Roth 401k option for this to work. If it does not, your plan sponsor has until 2027 to become compliant. But right now, you should be asking the question. There is a dark comedy somewhere in the fact that the government created the most powerful late-stage retirement contribution tool in history, buried it in a 2,000-page piece of legislation, named it Secure 2.0 Act of 2022, and then wondered why nobody knows about it. A financial advisor charged 1% of your assets is literally selling you information about your own money that the IRS published for free. I'm not angry about it. I genuinely find it funny in the way that watching a system reveal its own absurdity is funny. Now let me give you the full picture of where you probably actually stand. The average 401k balance for all savers right now is $146,400, according to Fidelity's fourth quarter 2025 analysis. The median is $38,176. That gap average versus median tells you everything about how skewed the distribution is. A small number of people with very large balances are dragging the average up. The median is you, probably. But there's another number that I find more compelling. Fidelity reports that people who have been in the same 401k for 15 consecutive years, consistent contributors, same plan, have an average balance of $617,600. And people with 10 years, $465,000. These are not crypto winners. These are not stock pickers. These are people who stayed in the plan. That is the bamboo principle made concrete. Even more striking, Empower's data from March of 2026 shows that retirement account millionaires, 2.29 million of them, tend to hit the $1 million milestone in their 50s. Not their 60s, their 50s. The average balance among people in their 50s who are on track is over $1 million. And the decade jump from the 40s to the 50s represents a 77% increase in average balances. The machine has already switched on before most people think it has. So how do I calculate my own crossover date? Fair question. Here's a simplified version. Take your current balance, multiply it by 0.07. That is your approximate annual gain at a 7% return. Now, compare that number to what you contribute per year, including employer match. If your annual contribution is still larger than your annual gain, you have not crossed yet. If your annual gain is larger, congratulations, you crossed. You just did not know it. For Marcus, with $112,000, 112,000 times 0.07 equals $7,840 in annual gains. His contributions are roughly $11,000. Contributions still win. He has not crossed yet, but he is close. If Marcus cuts his fund expense ratio from 1.1% to 0.05%, moving to a cheap index fund, his effective annual return increases, his gains grow faster, and his crossover point arrives approximately 2 years earlier. He did not work harder. He did not contribute more. He removed a friction That is the framework. There are 3 levers that determine when your 401k crosses the threshold. The first lever is starting balance. The bigger the base, the faster gains overtake contributions. The second lever is return rate net of fees, which is why fees are not a minor administrative detail, but a direct attack on the crossover timeline. The third lever is contribution size, which accelerates the base growth during the underground phase, shortening the time to crossover by building the root system faster. All 3 levers interact. You can compensate for starting late by cutting fees and increasing contributions. You can compensate for low contributions by starting early and holding a low fee fund. There are multiple paths, but they all converge on the same mathematical event. Here is the kicker on all of this. According to Fidelity data, the average age of a 401k millionaire is 59. Average savings tenure, 26 years, which means if you started contributing at 33 and you stayed in through the market swings, through the job transitions, through the moments when the balance looked embarrassingly small relative to what you thought you needed, you are statistically in the cohort that gets there. The 401k millionaires are not, by and large, people who made extraordinary financial decisions. They are people who stayed, who did not pull the bamboo, who sat in the underground phase long enough to see year 5. Now here is what Marcus actually finds out at the end of this story. 3 years from now, at 41, his annual gains cross his annual contributions. He does not celebrate, he does not notice. He is busy. The number in his account ticks past the crossover point on some unremarkable Tuesday, and his 401k quietly switches modes. It begins generating more money per year than he puts in. And every year after that, the gap grows. At 52, his balance crosses $400,000. His annual market gain at that point is over $28,000. He is contributing about $13,000. The machine is generating more than twice what he puts in. He did not get a raise. He did not win anything. He just stayed in the game long enough for the bamboo to grow. So here are the 3 practical takeaways from this video. Not generic advice, specific calibrations for this exact topic. First, calculate your crossover ratio right now. Balance times 0.07. Compare to your annual contribution plus employer match. If contributions still win, you are pre-crossover. Every dollar of additional contribution right now has disproportionate impact. You are feeding the root system at the most leveraged point in the timeline. Do not coast. Do not reduce contributions. The friction is highest right before the breakout. Second, audit your expense ratios this week. Not this month, this week. Log into your 401k plan. Find your fund options and look up the expense ratio on whatever you are currently in. If it is above 0.5%, find the equivalent index fund option in your plan's lineup and compare. In most major plans, a total stock market index fund or an S&P 500 index fund exists at a fraction of the cost. The crossover point does not care how you feel about active management. The math only measures the return that actually stays in your account. Third, if you are between 60 and 63 right now, this is the year you maximize the super catch-up. $35,750 in 2026. That is not a number you leave on the table if you can reach it. The super catch-up window closes at 64. After 63, you drop back to the standard catch-up of $8,000. 3 years of maximum super catch-up contributions at this stage of the compounding curve is the most concentrated retirement acceleration available to a legal US taxpayer. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And the reason is simple. Lazy investing does not generate signal. It does not have a Discord channel. It does not spike and crash and generate YouTube thumbnails. It just compounds silently, underground, until the bamboo breaks the surface. And everyone is shocked by how fast it grew. The shock is an illusion. The speed was always there. It was just invisible. According to Fidelity's latest data, a record 654,000 Americans are 401k millionaires. The average age of a retirement account millionaire is 59. The average savings tenure of Fidelity account millionaire savers is 26 years. That is not luck. That is